So the next thing I want to do is bring in this terrain that I've created with Gaia in Unity, and I want to bring it into Blender. So again, select the terrain, go to terrain, export to OBJ, choose my options, export, desktop. I'm just going to save this as terrain tutorial 2. I've already done that once. Let's save that. It's exported pretty quickly. Next, I'm going to go into Blender, go to brand new scene, and I'm going to import an OBJ. Find that. You'll notice now that this terrain is much larger than the one we looked at in the previous tutorial. It's 30 megs. And it's going to take a little while to load, so I'm going to press import. Again, my cursor kind of freaks out. I'm going to let that load. Now that it's loaded, there's a few things that we need to do in our scene to make this workable. Our terrain is really quite large, so we need to change our camera clipping. Otherwise, we're going to lose view of our terrain surprisingly quickly. So over here, in your side menu, scroll down under transform. You can see the clipping here. By default, it's set to 1000, or mine is set to 1000. And that's not going to be quite enough, so we're going to turn that up to 3000. You can see as soon as I did that, more of my terrain appeared. I'm no longer clipping the far side of it. You can see if I scroll out, I quickly lose visibility because my scale is so large. I'm going to try to move this over. It's a little challenging because I can't see exactly where I am, but my cursor thankfully is more or less at the origin. I'm going to get a side view, turn into orthographic mode, and looks like I'm already lined up on that axis, which is good. Okay. I'm going to apply that position, or that location rather. Do that by hitting Control A. Now what I've got is a terrain, but it's huge. I've got 500,000 faces, way more than I want. If I zoom in here, which you'll notice I've also got kind of what I complained about earlier, is I've got these very regular sized faces. These ones aren't too bad. There's enough variety in it that it's interesting. So I'm going to be using the Decimate Modifier, and maybe the Displace Modifier a little bit. Before I do that, one of the things that I've discovered is that the Decimate Modifier in particular treats angled faces differently than the non-angled faces. Meaning, or in other words, the faces that are horizontal get treated differently than the faces that are closer to vertical. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to zoom out so we can see all this. I'm going to go into edit mode, and this is going to take a little bit. There's a lot of faces to load, so Blender might pause here, and I might edit out the time that it takes to get there. So I'm going to go into edit mode. A little bit of a delay there, can be a little disconcerting if you're on a lower powered machine, it might take longer. I'm going to unselect by hitting A all of my vertices, and then I'm going to select some of these here that I know to be flat. And again, that circle tool, if I select it, you can see there's quite a bit of lag going on. It's pretty normal. Hopefully we can get around some of that. So I'm going to go to mesh, and select, and I'm going to select similar. And I'm going to select similar by normal. Again, that might take some time. If I zoom out, you can see that it's selected all of the flat faces. And also here on the left side, you can choose the threshold just as you need. Over on the right-hand side, we're going to choose the Vertex tab here, or that's what I like to call it. Vertex Groups, and I'm going to add a Vertex Group. And I'm going to name this, sometimes it lets me name, sometimes it doesn't. We're going to create this group, and we're going to assign all these selected vertices to it. Okay. Now I'm going to come back into my scene in edit mode, and I'm going to hit Control I. And that's going to invert my selection. So it's going to select all the other vertices, the ones that are angled. I'm going to create another group, and I'm going to assign to that. I'm going to go, and then I'm going to go back into object mode. Now, usually if I get back into object mode, it'll let me rename them. It has a hard time doing it in edit mode with so many vertices. So I'm going to call the first one flat. And I'm going to call these ones hills. It's not the best naming convention, but it works. And now what that's going to let me do is apply my modifiers based just on vertex groups. So I'm coming to my modifier, And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to decimate this so it's a little bit easier to work with. I'm going to add 2 decimate modifiers. The first one here, I'm going to choose a vertex group. I'm going to do the flat. And the second one, I'm going to choose the hills. And this is going to, again, like I said, let me apply the modifiers based on vertex groups. So if I try sliding this back and forth, Blender's going to get really upset just because there's so many vertices. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm just going to start at half and knock these down. And same there. Takes Blender a little while to figure that one out. You can see that is not the look I'm going for at all. And the reason that that happened is because I applied the same amount to both the hills and the flats. And Blender has a hard time decimating those slope sides of the hills, which is why I've separated them. So I'm going to put that back up. Let's try 0.75. And there we go. It's starting to look a little bit better. Still got a little bit of pinching or weirdness at the top there. So I might turn that up again. 0.8. And again, you're just going to have to set this so that it feels good to you. Might be too much. I've kind of got that. I'm going to maybe back down to 0.75. See if I can get rid of some of that shaping there that I don't like. There, that's definitely better. Smoothed it out a little bit. There, it looks pretty good. So again, this is just a Blender model, so you can modify as you need. I'm going to apply these and show you the next step of what I do. Apply these. Once I do that, I've cut my face count down by more than half. So Blender's a lot happier. We can go into edit mode a lot easier. You can see we pop in and out of edit mode much quicker. My next step is to try to color this at some level. My next step is to color this. So I'm going to do that with materials. So I'm going to create a material. We're going to just call this, I don't know, we're going to call this sand. Color this a little bit. I personally think specular in low poly looks horrible, so we're going to turn all that all the way off. Okay, and we've got that. By default, your first material gets applied to all your vertices. Next thing I'm going to do is add another material, and I'm going to call this one grass. I'm not going to get too fancy with my coloring for the sake of the demonstration. I'm going to find a green that doesn't look horrible. Make it darker a little bit. Turn down the specular yet again. Now that didn't apply to anything because I'm not in edit mode. So I'm going to go into edit mode. Now rather than try to paint this all on by hand, I like to cheat a little bit. So I'm going to go to a side view like this, scroll out, and I'm going to make sure I've unselected everything, hitting A a couple times. And this option down here, this button down here, it's going to limit my selection to visible, or if I toggle it, I can also select things that I can't see. And then I'm going to use my box select. I'm going to select everything that's kind of above that sea level, like so. Get a top-down view. You can see what I've selected. This is basically the terrain that's going to be above the water. And I'm going to assign the grass to it. If I go back into object mode, you can see that I've left the sand on the shore and on the ocean bottom, but everything on the ground is now green. Now, I'm going to end up having to tidy this up a little bit, the edges. I may or may not like the way my edges got colored, but the bulk of my coloring's been done. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the hills. I'm going to give these hills a different color. So create a new material, hills, turn that specular down, and I'm going to go for a reddish brown. I've been liking the reddish brown lately for hills. Okay, and again, nothing's applied because I'm not in edit mode. So I'm going to go back to edit mode and go back to the side view. I'm going to zoom in because that's where my hills are. I'm going to unselect everything. And then I'm going to box select the best I can. This part gets a little messier than the first step. I'm going to select the hills like that. Go to a top-down view to kind of see what I've selected. That's pretty reasonable. I'm going to assign that hill color. Now what you can see is I've applied my hill color. Now I've definitely missed, right? You can see that I've missed the sides here. So let me try that, go back in one more time. See if I can select a, I can zoom out a little bit there. Assign, go back to, yeah, I'm still kind of missing it. I might have to go in and touch this up by hand. So if I want to touch this up by hand, I won't do this all, but I'll show you my process. Go into face selection mode, unselect, and I'm going to use my circle select tool and do this long and tedious bit here and assign like that. This part does take a while. Again, if I could figure out a better way, I wish I would. If anybody knows a better way of doing that, please leave a comment. So that's how I add colors and textures to it. Now, these are not colors and textures that I want to import into Unity. If I bring these straight into Unity, it'll look okay, but the lighting's not going to be great. So the next video, I'll show you how I take these colors and turn them into a texture that Unity can light pretty well.